The breakup occurred over Texas. This is New Mexico, so these would have been, this is exactly what you would expect to see as a space shuttle would streak across the night sky on its way to its landing. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. All right, as we look at that shot, and we will tell you that the president was at Camp David when it happened. He's on his way back, should be there about noontime, and that's where Suzanne Malveaux is. Suzanne, what do you have for us?
Well, earlier today I spoke with White House spokesman Scott McClellan, who said, yes, the president was notified of the situation by his chief of staff, Andy Card. They made the decision that it would be better to monitor the situation here from the White House. As you mentioned, the president is on his way back to the White House. He'll be here shortly after noon. Also spoke with a senior administration official who said that there was no indication that the shuttle had any type of threat that was against it, or that was in any type of range of anti-aircraft, anti-missile range, and that there was no indication that this was any type of terrorist situation. Of course, they're still getting lots of information, but initial indications from senior administration officials saying that it does not point in that direction. I should also tell you as well that sources tell us that the president, when he comes back, is expected to make a statement, some sort of briefing, that he is also expected to call Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, as you had mentioned before, one of those on the shuttle, an Israeli citizen, that the president is all likelihood to call him later this afternoon, and that we will hear from Mr. Bush when he returns. Miles.
CNN's Suzanne Malveaux. We'll, obviously, the minute the president gets back and makes a statement, we'll be getting back to you, so stay close, please. Let's go to Elizabeth Cohen. Elizabeth Cohen in the newsroom here has had an opportunity to speak with members of one of the crew members' family, and we're just going to leave it at that right now. Elizabeth, what can you tell us?
Miles, I was speaking on the phone just a few moments ago with a brother of one of the astronauts. I'm not going to name the astronaut just to protect the privacy of this family, but he said that in the past 2 hours since the contact was lost, the families have been speaking with each other. The families of the different astronauts have been speaking with each other. They met each other at the launch. There were various activities for the family members. I am sure that they did not expect to get back in contact with one another quite in this way. This gentleman was saying that he expects to be summoned to a memorial service, perhaps in Houston, sponsored, given by NASA. He expects to get that phone call soon. And again, the families turning to each other for support in this difficult time. Miles?
Did they indicate there is a fairly rigorous protocol, if you will, that NASA employs, where they have people assigned to each family member to assist them through all this? Did you get any sense that that was occurring, and were they getting the support they need?
The man who I was speaking to is a brother of one of the astronauts. He said he had had no contact from NASA. Now, perhaps the astronaut's spouse had contact, or parents, or somebody else. Perhaps this person hadn't, but others had. He did indicate, though, that he expected, and that the families expected, that they would be summoned back in.
Elizabeth Cohen, thank you very much. Let us know if you find anything else out as we continue our coverage here.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at a live picture which tells probably as much as this shot we've been showing you. Kennedy Space Center, that's in front of a place they call the Turn Basin, right beside the countdown clock. In the distance, Launch Pad 39A, where the Space Shuttle Columbia launched 16 days ago. It was a beautiful afternoon launch, the flag at half-staff, in memory of the 7-person crew of Columbia. And that launch pad, hard to say when that launch pad might be used again. Very premature to even discuss anything along those lines, but there you see it. There you see the flag, and that in many ways sums up what we are talking about here. CNN's Andrea Koppel has been talking to Israeli officials, and we should point out that, in case you're just tuning in, that Ilan Ramon was a member of this crew, the first Israeli astronaut. Andrea, what have you heard?
Well, Miles, I've spoken with the spokesman from the Israeli embassy here in Washington, and he tells me that they have dispatched a small team down to the Kennedy Space Center, where Colonel Ramon's wife, his 4 children, and we believe his parents, who were quite elderly, were awaiting his arrival. The embassy itself obviously had no comment. They're waiting for the government in Jerusalem to take the lead there. But having said that, you know, just looking at this picture, Colonel Ramon was so much more than just a professional and, as you pointed out, the first Israeli to go into space, but he really was somewhat of a, you know, a national hero, the quintessential hero, if you will, for Israel. This is a man that flew in the Yom Kippur War in 1973. He fought in the 1982 war with Lebanon. He was also, believe it or not, one of the pilots that bombed the Iraqi nuclear reactor back in 1981. He is a payload specialist who's been training for this mission since 1997. And in fact, his job on board the space shuttle was supposed to be basically using cameras on board to look at how desert dust and other contaminants that you would find in the atmosphere, Earth's atmosphere, how that's affected by rainfall and temperature. So this was a mission that the entire Israeli public was watching and really had their heart in their hands. And at this moment, you can imagine how many hearts across Israel and certainly in this country as well are breaking right now. Miles.
Andrea Koppel, thank you very much. Certainly that is the case everywhere right now as we pause to think about those family members. Let's take a look at a picture. We've been getting some email images in from our viewers, and this is the first picture we've seen from Nacogdoches County, Texas. And I've been calling it Central Texas. I'm told by some people it's more accurate to call it East Texas, but it's safe to say that there's a big, wide swath of area that has been seen, what you're about to see as I scroll down here, which is a piece of debris on the ground there. If we put it through the telestrator, I can highlight it for you. Hang on, I over scrolled there. Hopefully get it up to the point where we've got it in a place where you can see it. There you see it right there on the pavement. It looks like it's right near an apartment building. What I want to reiterate is what NASA has been saying all morning long, which is don't touch it. Don't go near it. Call the authorities. Let them know it's there. Try to keep people from touching it if you can. It's apt to contain all kinds of hazardous things. Hydrazine is just on the top of my list right off the bat, which is a very nasty substance which is used to fire the rockets on orbit and also powers the auxiliary power units. Nitrogen tetroxide, which can burn you. That's an oxidizer which mixes, creates those thruster firings on orbit. Don't go near it. It can hurt you. It's also, I should point out, against the law. We've been listening in to members of the crew. I'm hopeful that we have some more of those interviews ready to go. We talked to the crew. Okay, apparently we do not have them quite ready. We're going to try to. All right, we have a reporter from where? All right, we've got somebody at the Kennedy Space Center to check in with us. Grayson Carl. Grayson, I don't know, you're with Central Florida 13.
That's right, Miles.
Grayson, tell us what's been going on there.
With Central Florida News 13, I cover the Kennedy Space Center in this area. It's a very, very surreal feeling out here. We've done this several times before. You stand up, you get ready for the landing. We all look down south, and we look, and nothing came. And we're used to hearing a pair of sonic booms that come in a few minutes before the landing as the shuttle drops back through the sound barrier. And we didn't hear that, and it kind of raised everyone's eyebrows. And then everyone started looking, and the countdown clock that counts down to the landing time started counting back up, which is what it does when after it passes the landing time, and it started hitting 6 and even 7 minutes, and none of us knew quite how to handle it. The family and the visitors and the guests that were all there, I'm not sure if the astronauts' families were out there, they typically are, but all the guests, all the VIPs were ushered into NASA buses and escorted away from the shuttle landing strip. We were escorted away shortly after that. We've headed back to the press site here, which is by the vehicle assembly building in the center of the Kennedy Space Center, and really they're not telling us much more than what you guys, I'm sure, have been finding out there in Atlanta and all over. They are scheduling some sort of press conference here for apparently 11:30. We're going to try and find out more from them at that time. But really, this whole community is just devastated. This whole area is tied to the Kennedy Space Center. We call this area the Space Coast. We grew up here. There's not a person here who doesn't know somebody who works at the Kennedy Space Center. I'm sure a lot of folks all over can identify with, an Air Force base or something else nearby where it's like that, and that's what it's like here with the Kennedy Space Center. And it's just, the silence here is eerie. I look at the other reporters I work with every day. We don't know what to say to each other. It's a very bizarre feeling. There's been talk about what caused this failure, and I guess the latest we've gotten is from Johnson Space Center. They said something about losing a piece of insulation off the external tank into the heat shield. And Miles, as you know, that the heat shield is a very unpredictable part of the shuttle, but we really don't know if that's what's caused it. We're waiting till 11:30 to try and find out that information. But the community here is really, just devastated. Not only were there experiments on board Columbia, there was also some part of the ground-based experiments that were actually being done out of Florida Tech, the Florida Institute of Technology in Melbourne, which is just 30 miles down the road. They were doing some of the ground-based things with the European Space Agency, doing the same experiments they were doing up in space down here on Earth at almost the same time. So there are connections to this mission all through this area, the Central Florida area. People commute to the Kennedy Space Center, which is over on the coast. They commute from as far away as Orlando or even further away, and so there are people in neighborhoods all across Central Florida that the fella down the street or their friend's mom works out here at the Kennedy Space Center, and they just don't know how to handle it. It's very eerily quiet out here. Press officers have been driving back and forth in cars trying to gather information for us now, but Miles, really, we're just kind of in a state of absolute disbelief. We know what's supposed to happen, and we knew things were wrong, and just our worst fears have been confirmed.
Grayson, I think many of us got the sense, even those of us who are close to the space program, that the landing was just not as big a concern. And, what we have to recall here is the tremendous heat which a shuttle encounters. And I wonder if in the control room they can get that shot of the launch queued up, because we can talk about what Grayson made just a tangential reference to, which was on ascent during the launch. There was a piece of debris, which was noted by engineers, which fell off the external tank. Now, if we could roll that tape, it's very difficult to make out here, and I'm not sure that I've identified the precise moment, but if you let it roll, and this was something that was well known to engineers, because the first thing they do after a launch is pour over some camera views that you can hardly imagine, close-ups, high-speed photography, which gives them a sense of all kinds of things. And they can find out a lot of things about what happened on ascent and perhaps plan accordingly for re-entry. Now, the concern is that as you look at the shuttle's external tank there, it is covered with foam. The reason it's covered with foam is it contains liquid hydrogen. It's like minus 300 degrees Fahrenheit or something along those lines. The coldest substance on the planet. Ice foam has been noted to fall off, and at those speeds, the ice or foam which could fall off the external tank, which is this kind of brownish color, at those speeds could damage some of these tiles. The shuttle is covered in these ceramic tiles, which are very fragile, about 20,000 of them on the Columbia alone, along with blankets and carbon and all kinds of things to protect what is an aluminum frame as it comes in for re-entry. Aluminum would be soup if it wasn't protected by the thermal system. But it's a very fragile system, and it remains the most labor-intensive aspect of keeping the shuttles aloft and keeping them flying. Now, Grayson, the conversations I had with engineers there was, we've looked at this debris falling off, we focused on where it landed, and we don't think it's a big deal. Did you hear the same things?
That's the same thing I've heard. These flight engineers do this for a living. They do it every day. They find problems, and they have to make that analysis on whether it's safe and what the conditions are, whether they need to make repairs, what can happen. But
All right, we just lost our signal, unfortunately, from Grayson. And with that, we're going to turn back to Jerry Lininger. Jerry, are you at home? Jerry?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Jerry in northern Michigan at home, who veteran of the shuttle, veteran of Mir. Jerry, it's been a little while since we talked. I'm curious if anything else has come to mind for you on what might have happened here? What sorts? And I don't want to get way ahead of this, but I mean, let's give the areas of interest that would be some of the prime suspects in this.
I think you've been covering them well, Miles. I think it's very dynamic. Obviously, a lot of friction, a lot of pressure buildup when you're streaking through the atmosphere. Friction's what slows you down. You're inside a big fireball, plasma collapsing around you. So its airframe is the first thing I would worry about. Metal fatigue, things of that nature. I think what you mentioned, if there's a defect in the insulation, a tile at a critical point, if it hits for example, a control mechanism, and you lose control of the vehicle, the top of the vehicle, for example, cannot withstand the type of heat that you take during re-entry. So, all the things you're pointing toward are things that you have to be concerned about.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's a heck of a crew on board as you go through the people. And
let's talk about them a bit.
Skilled, dedicated, courageous people.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing, the people on the ground, besides not touching it for their own safety, I'm sure everybody wants to, in Texas and around the world, wants to make sure we figure out what caused it so it never happens again. So.
Yeah. Jerry, you've been inside the space program and know exactly what happens and how NASA prepares for these to aid and assist the families. What is happening right now to help these families out?
There's usually a family escort, and that's many times an astronaut that goes along with the family, especially during the launch time. And at landing, it sort of depends on the family's request and how comfortable they feel. If it's maybe the guy's third or fourth flight, the family feels comfortable in knowing what to do. But on first flights, a lot of times they'll provide an escort to be with family. If they're going to be there at landing, I'm sure there's people there to kind of tell them what happens during landing and to ease their concerns. And now, of course, they're there to try to comfort them.
And it's probably a challenge which, it's got to be an incredibly difficult time for them and for these families to try to sort through all of this. Jerry, this is something that astronauts certainly know about, but I wouldn't say they fear it.
I don't think they fear it. We have confidence. You heard Rick Husband, the commander, talking before he left. He's got confidence in the vehicle. Got confidence in all the great people that make that vehicle go to space. And, it's obviously a tragedy of great, depth here. And, there's a lot of people feeling very badly. I'm sure everybody in the world feels badly.
What does this do to the program, Jerry?
The interesting thing, you flashed up there's a cosmonaut and two astronauts on board space station. So you've got a space station up there orbiting that depends upon the shuttle. You have other means. You can use a Soyuz capsule, the Russian capsule, to get there. But, I think exploration and discovery and going out there and pushing the envelope, and that's what the astronauts do every day of their lives up there in space.
Jerry, you mentioned an important point. We have a crew up there, Don Pettit, Ken Bowersox, Russian cosmonaut, whose name is escaping me this moment. I apologize for that. Budarin, I believe. And it is, they, at this point, are sort of not stranded. They have a Soyuz capsule there, which they can take to leave any time. And I guess we should point that out to our viewers. Are you there, Jerry? Okay. All right. Let's move on, and we'll think about that point a little bit later. United Space Alliance is the prime contractor for the space shuttle. It's a synthesis of a couple of big aerospace companies, Boeing and Lockheed Martin. USA is the prime contractor, which does the work in getting a space shuttle to orbit and bringing it back and turning it around. A lot of people don't realize that most of the employees at NASA work for contractors, and the NASA civilian force is actually a small part of it. The real work is done, in many respects, by the United Space Alliance. With us on the line now is Jeff Carr, spokesperson for USA. Jeff, are you in Florida?
No, Miles, I'm in Houston near Mission Control.
What can you tell us from your perspective? What have you seen? What have you heard? And do you have any sense of where things are headed right now?
Well, Miles, as frustrating as it may be to your viewers, we really don't know what happened. you've done a great job so far, I think, of laying out the sequence of events. And I was listening to your interview with Jerry Lininger, and I thought he brought some very level perspective to it. But right now, we're working closely with NASA to go back and review all of the data, look for anything that might be a telltale sign of what occurred. Unfortunately, our first indication that anything was wrong with what looked like a picture-perfect reentry this morning came with that loss of communications. And until we do determine what happened, our primary concern is with, of course, the safety and well-being of the crew. And until we know what happened, that's going to continue to be our primary concern.
Jeff, once again, bear with me here because I don't want to get too far down the road of speculation, but I do want to address this issue because it's out there. This is the piece of debris which fell off on ascent while it was rising to orbit. What can you tell us about what we know about that? As I've been telling our viewers, the sense I got from talking to people at NASA is that they discounted they basically said it wasn't a big deal.
Well, I would take exception with their discounting it, Miles. I think what happened is a lot of very smart people took using good technology, took a good look at the imagery that was available and analyzed that image and basically determined that it was not conclusive.
Jeff, let me interrupt you while you say that. Let's get that image up if we could, that ascent image, the launch image where we see, I believe if you look closely, you can see some debris falling off. Go ahead, Jeff. What was the determination as they looked at it very closely there?
Well, basically, Miles, it was a non-determination. There wasn't any indication, any immediate indication that there was any damage of note. And I think it's really at this point much too early to begin speculating that there's any linkage between that event and what has occurred this morning. We don't know what the cause is, and it just wouldn't be productive to speculate at this point.
No, and I don't want to do that, and I don't want you to have the sense that that's where I'm headed with this. It's just that this is something that people are aware of, and I wanted to at least get a sense from you as to where it stood and what the feeling was. I mean, the shuttle, in the course of its 113 mission history, has lost tiles before.
That's true, but at this point, we don't even know that there were tiles lost or to what extent they were lost, Miles. And this is one of many stones that's going to be overturned. We're going to be looking at every scrap of information and evidence that could help us understand what happened today. That activity is going to be ongoing for days, weeks, maybe months. I don't know. But right now, our primary concern is to determine as best we can what happened and to determine the safety and well-being of the crew. And Miles, before we go too much farther, I really want to say that those of us at United Space Alliance, our hearts go out to the families of the crew members. Their families are our families. We're a very close-knit community, and we want them to know that they're in our thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, and that's worth thinking for a moment about. Tell me this, Jeff. Can you walk me through re-entry and give me just a sense of what the vehicle encounters from the moment it does that deorbit burn all the way down to landing at the Kennedy Space Center?
Well, of course, Miles, the two most intense periods of time during a shuttle mission are the launch and ascent and the entry and landing. The launch and ascent lasts 8.5 minutes. The process of re-entry, an hour. From the time the orbital maneuvering system engines burn to deorbit the vehicle, there's a great deal of energy stored in the vehicle as a result of all the energy it's gained during ascent and that it possesses during the orbit phase. That energy's got to be depleted, and the vehicle basically breaks through the atmosphere by flying wide S-turns and sort of skipping against the atmosphere. It's a brute force operation with a little finesse to manage the loads on the vehicle and the temperatures on the vehicles. And we've never had in the history of the program an issue such as this during entry and landing, but we all know that this is one of the most dynamic phases of any mission.
And the temperatures that a shuttle endures through all this, in excess of 2,000 degrees, correct? Fahrenheit?
I believe that's right.
And so clearly, the heat shield is something that is very important and has to be considered. Is there anything else you can tell us about? The term is telemetry. That's basically all those radio signals that feed all those computer screens in Houston. Is there anything in that telemetry that anybody has seen that showed any sorts of hiccups on any other systems that would give anybody any preliminary indications as to what might have been going wrong?
Miles, I was not in the control center this morning, so I can't tell you absolutely that nothing was noticed, but at present there's nothing that's leading us to any conclusions. There are two ways to determine the status of the vehicle during entry and landing, particularly over the continental United States. One of those is the telemetry that's sent from the vehicle to the ground, and the other is ground-based C-band radar tracking information. And unfortunately, we found ourselves in Houston without any indications either way.
Jeff Carr, United Space Alliance spokesperson, joining us from Houston. We appreciate it. We'd like to get back to you whenever you feel it's important. And
Miles, there is one important note
please.
I might add.
Go ahead.
And I very much appreciate your efforts to let folks in East Texas know that any debris that they might encounter out there could be hazardous. There are toxic chemicals aboard the vehicle at that phase of reentry, and as curious as they may be, it's important to their safety to report any debris that they might encounter to the local authorities and stay away from it.
Words to the wise. Please, if you're in earshot and you're in that part of the world, we implore you to listen to that, because that would just compound the tragedy that we're seeing unfold today. Jeff Carr, we'll check in with you in just a bit. Quick recap for you at the bottom of the hour. It's 11:30 Eastern now. 2 hours and 15 minutes ago, we should have seen the shuttle Columbia touch down gracefully for a landing at the 15,000-foot runway at the Kennedy Space Center. Instead, on its 28th flight, the 113th mission in shuttle history, the Space Shuttle Columbia broke up mid-flight over Central and East Texas at an altitude of 200,000 miles plus, in excess of 6 times the speed of sound. The pictures that we've been showing you are dramatically tell the tale from our affiliate WFAA as it broke into numerous large pieces. Those are those bright points followed by distinct trails behind them, sort of like multiple comets or meteorites. Traveling faster than a speeding bullet at that point. The crew of 7 was finishing up a 16-day science mission, which went off pretty much without a hitch. And right now, search and rescue teams are fanning out all across Texas, searching for debris. And as a matter of fact, we have a piece of debris which one of our viewers sent to us from one of the counties there. You'll see it right in the middle. If you see something like this, folks, please don't touch it. Please don't touch it. Just leave it there and try to keep others from touching it. Call the authorities. It's going to be a big debris field over a huge, huge area, multiple pieces, huge area. And in the interest of your own personal safety, you are implored to leave it be. We have with us Suzanne Malveaux, who's at the White House. The president is en route back to the White House. We're expecting, by the way, a news conference from NASA, Kennedy Space Center, and we hope to get that soon. But in the meantime, Suzanne, can you tell us, you've had a chance to talk to some people inside the White House who've had access to the Situation Room and what's going on. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you a senior administration official assures us, and he says, I'm quoting here, there is no reason to believe, no indication that this is terrorism, that they are fully investigating the matter, but a senior administration official reassuring the American people, saying there is no indication that this is terrorism. We did speak with Scott McClelland. He is a White House spokesman. He gave us a TikTok, the details of how this unfolded before the president, that he was notified by Chief of Staff Andy Card immediately after NASA lost contact with the shuttle. Also, Dr. Condi Rice was notified, as well as Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of State Colin Powell, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, as well as the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Myers. We are told that the president did speak with NASA's Director O'Keefe at 10:30 this morning, that they will continue to remain in contact, but they have had an initial conversation about what is taking place. The decision was made that it would be best that the president return here to the White House to continue to monitor situations. They say that that they are still gathering information at this time. We have also learned as well is that Governor Ridge, who is now Secretary of Homeland Security, that he has made a number of calls, that he has reached out calling the governor of Texas, Governor Perry, also calling officials from Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, Louisiana, that all regarding possible falling debris, that he wanted to make sure to touch base with all of them to let them know of the dangerous situation. As you know, we've been hearing from NASA officials all morning on that. We have also been told that the White House has been in contact with Israeli officials, not the president, not on that level, but certainly U.S. officials in contact with Israeli officials regarding that the one person who was on the shuttle, an Israeli citizen. All of this unfolding, the president, of course, taking this very seriously, very concerned about it. We are expecting him to arrive back at the White House shortly, where, yes, he will be conferring with his chief of staff, Andy Card, Dr. Rice, among others, to monitor this situation. And they're very concerned, and they say that, yes, this is unfolding, but everybody is fully aware of all of the information as it comes in. And again, a senior administration official emphasizing this morning, and I'm quoting here, there is no reason to believe that there is any indication that this is terrorism. Miles.
Suzanne Malveaux, that's worth underscoring. We got to remember the altitude and speed at which the shuttle was traveling at the time of the breakup. 200,000 feet, 6 times the speed of sound. It's pretty hard to conjure up a terrorist or any sort of way of reaching it if terrorism is your thought. But we do have to address that issue in this day and age, so we do. Let's take a quick look at the map. And this is, I've been calling it Central Texas. It's really East Central Texas. As you take a look at the map, this is the area, Palestine, Nacogdoches, St. Augustine. These are the areas where we've been hearing about debris. Now, as the shuttle came in across this way, traveling fast, traveling high, that debris field is apt to be just staggeringly huge. So, and it's also likely that there's an awful lot of small pieces. So we're going to underscore that point one more time. If you see something, don't touch it. Ed Lavandera is right near a piece of debris. He's in Corsicana, Texas, which isn't too far from Dallas. Ed, what are you seeing?
Well, Miles, we are driving along Interstate 45 headed southbound out of Dallas toward the Palestine and Nacogdoches area. And we have come across the first location where we've seen what appears to be some sort of piece of debris that has been smoldering for some time now in a wide open field, brown dirt all over the place. And we see a group of people. We're about the people in this debris is about 300, 400 yards away from the interstate, so it's hard to really make out what exactly is going on over there. But clearly, people walking through this field, and this isn't a field that you would walk through by any means. Protecting that area, a lot of interest, onlookers from the interstate stopping to see what was going on. And Miles, you mentioned just how huge this area is. We've been listening to radio reports throughout the morning as we've been driving. And there are reports coming in from all over East Texas, from Marshall, which is very close to along Interstate 20 near the Louisiana border, all the way down south to Nacogdoches. We're talking several hundred miles in a huge swath of land through East Texas that these reports have been coming in through. So this is the first little piece of debris that we've been able to see. And as we continue to drive toward Palestine, we've had indications that there are more reports and more debris that has been found from Palestine into the Nacogdoches area as well. Miles?
Ed, just can you describe the piece for me? Are you close enough to have a sense of that?
No, it's so hard to see. You can tell that it was a dark piece of debris, and unfortunately, that's why I was describing the dirt. It's very dark dirt soil in this area. So all you could see was something kind of sitting on top of the soil there, some piece of debris, and it's hard to describe what it might have been. But it was distinguished because you could see the smoke coming from the debris as well. And you could also see a group of about 6 or 7 people in the distance almost guarding the area.
Ed Lavandera, who is on the road in the midst of that debris field. We conducted some extensive interviews with the 7-person crew of Columbia before they left. And I'd like to, hopeful that we can share some of that throughout the course of this. And I believe we have some more of that ready. I don't know who we have ready in the queue and ready to go. Maybe you can give me a sense of that in the control room. All right, Willie McCool. Willie McCool was the pilot, first-time flyer, United States Navy. and a commander in the Navy, used to carrier landings and flying the EA-6B. Here's what he had to say before he left.
For me, it doesn't really affect me because I'm just so focused on the mission and the training. And gosh, I've got a Navy background. I've been flying off carriers and doing night landings and dealt with pitching decks in bad weather. So you just kind of get immuneness, in a sense, to the environment around you, and you deal with it. And that's pretty much my attitude with regard to the 9/11 events. And I guess I have more concern maybe for my family. I just want to do everything I can to put them at ease. And I know that NASA has done a wonderful job in coping with the necessity for new security measures, and I think they've done a good job in doing that and have given comfort to me and my crewmates, and in particular our families along those lines.
Tremendous concerns about security before this mission launched because of one occupant in particular. I mean, every shuttle mission since 9/11 has had added security, just like everything else we've encountered in our lives since 9/11. But in this mission in particular, one occupant put the security measures really over the top, unprecedented in the history of NASA's shuttle missions, 113 of them since it began in April of '81. The reason, one occupant, citizen of Israel, the first Israel ever to fly in space, Colonel Ilan Ramon. And really, I don't think people here in the United States are as aware that he was a true hero of the state of Israel. Let's go to Heidi Collins, who has more on that.
Thanks, Miles. Going to try to help you out a little bit here. We want to tell you about Ilan Ramon. As Miles was just saying, he was the first Israeli astronaut, 48 years old, and just as tragically as for the rest of the astronauts who had family, he was a family man, a father, a husband, and 4 children. And the Israeli embassy has now sent a small team to Florida to be with Ramon's wife and her children, and also his parents are there as well. As you can imagine, the feelings that they must have, along with the other families standing by at Kennedy Space Center awaiting the arrival and the landing of the shuttle Columbia. We are going to go now to Kelly Wallace, who is standing by in Israel to tell us a little bit more about the background of Ilan Ramon. Kelly?
Well, Heidi, as you can imagine, tremendous sadness going through the entire country of Israel as these events are unfolding. We do have some reaction from Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, his office issuing a statement a short time ago. The statement saying, quote, "The government of Israel and the people of Israel pray together with the whole world for the safety of the astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia." The statement going on to say the state of Israel and its citizens stand at this difficult hour with the families of the astronauts, Colonel Ramon's family, the American people, and the U.S. government. As you said, Heidi, a small team from the U.S. Embassy in Washington going to Florida because that is where Colonel Ramon's wife and his 4 children are. They were there, of course, awaiting the return of the Space Shuttle Columbia. We know that Colonel Ramon's father, though, here in Israel. In fact, he was watching, or was at, an Israeli television station. We understand he was there to watch the events unfold, to watch the return of the space shuttle, and then, of course, he watched the events on television. We believe Colonel Ramon's father has since left that station to return to his family. Now, Colonel Ramon, really the pride of Israel, an Air Force colonel with more than 3,000 flight hours. He has a distinguished career. He served in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. He also was part of the mission back in 1981, a mission to bomb a nuclear reactor in Iraq. We have colleagues going around Israel talking to people here. As you can imagine, tremendous shock on the people, from the people of Israel on this night.
We're a very depressed country at the moment with the impending war in Iraq, the Intifada, the political problems that we have. I think this is going to hit Israelis quite hard because it's very personal. Yeah. The wife has been interviewed. We know the kids, the kids are known in their classes and in schools. It's very personal. It's a very personal loss for everybody. I'm very upset.
A very personal loss, Heidi, indeed, because, when Colonel Ramon took off on the Space Shuttle Columbia. It was front page news in every Israeli newspaper, live coverage on every Israeli television station. This, after all, the first Israeli astronaut in space. But also put this in context. This is a country experiencing a great deal of violence. More than 2 years now of the second intifada against Israel, more than 80 suicide bombings, tremendous violence, the economy really in a devastating situation right now. So lots of bad news. A lot of people looked at Colonel Ramon and his mission as some good news, really in a sea of very difficult times. Back to you, Heidi.
That's right, Kelly, and obviously Colonel Ramon, lots and lots of experience to finally get to this day, which is seen amongst the flying world as quite an honor to become an astronaut. It takes very hard work and a lot of hours. He was an F-16 pilot, more than 1,000 hours in that plane that we are familiar with, of course, in this country. He also took place in the 1981 bombing of a nuclear reactor in Iraq. So once again, payload specialist on this mission, 48 years old. Father of 4, and obviously a devoted husband. I want to go ahead and go now to another reporter that we have standing by at the Kennedy Space Center, Grayson Kalm of Central Florida News, standing by to tell us more about the situation there. Grayson?
Hi, we were expecting a press conference with the media representatives here at the Kennedy Space Center. We've actually been moved from the shuttle landing facility to the central part of the Kennedy Space Center at the media site. We were expecting a press conference at 11:30. That has come and gone. We are told now that NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe is on his way here. As soon as the head of NASA gets here, they say that's when they will hold a press conference and give us any more information than they have been giving us. Even though we are right here with all of the press people who are coordinating all this, we know a little more than you guys have heard there in Atlanta and everywhere else. It has just been a day of trying to piece together information ever since we waited for the shuttle to land and it never came. So right now, you go into the media center and you've got people on 2 different cell phones and a regular phone trying to coordinate this, trying to bring it all together to give us some idea of the latest information of what they have. But right now, it's been very sketchy.
All right, Grayson Kalm, thanks so very much for the update from Kennedy Space Center. Too, we want to make sure that we remind you about something that Miles O'Brien has been talking about all morning long. Very, very important for the people in the debris field, which, as we've mentioned, is absolutely huge across Central and East Texas. There are 2 chemicals, 2 main propellants that may cause a serious danger if you get anywhere near them. Let me just tell you what they are: nitrogen tetroxide and monomethyl hydrazine. These are very, very dangerous materials to the touch even. So if you are curious, if you are seeing a piece of debris on your land or on your property, do your very, very best to stay absolutely as far away from it as possible. Report it to authorities and make sure that you do err on the side of caution from this. We're going to send it back over to Miles O'Brien now, who's standing by to tell us what he knows. Miles.
Thanks very much, Heidi. Appreciate that. Probably can't underscore that point enough for you. It would just compound a terrible tragedy if somebody were to be burned or disfigured in some way by hydrazine, which is in particular very, very volatile, ultimately cancer-causing substance. And both that and the nitrogen tetroxide can burn you just to touch it. So don't do it. Just stay away from it and help the authorities in all this by letting them know where it is. We have with us on the phone line Michael Vaughn, and Michael was in charge of this. He's actually with us live. He was in charge of the Situation Room back 17 years ago this past week, when on the day of what should have been the State of the Union, the Challenger exploded a little more than a minute after liftoff. Anybody who was around then remembers that harrowing day, the decision to actually cancel the State of the Union address that night by Ronald Reagan. Michael Vaughn was there. Tell us, if you could give us a sense, sort of paint the scene for us in the Situation Room at times like this.
Well, it comes as a shock to the duty officers, just as it is a shock to people at home. When I was there sitting at my desk watching the Challenger lift off and saw it explode, it was an extraordinary shock, and the first thing I did was ran upstairs and tell people about it, and that's probably what they did today as they heard about it. In 1986, CNN wasn't quite so nimble as it is now, and we actually had to make phone calls to find out what was going on. And we called the Johnson Spacecraft Center and the Kennedy Spacecraft Center And the emphasis at that time.
You know, I've got to interrupt you just briefly,
Sure.
Michael, because we're not making clear what we're seeing right at the screen. That is file tape from 17 years ago. That's
Yes.
Challenger. That has nothing to do with today's events. Okay, go ahead.
Today's events, quite similar to then. The first thing the Situation Room does, and its primary duty is the President's Alert Center, is to find out what happened and tell people about it. With us, it was quite easy because they were upstairs. With them, they had to make telephone calls to presidents at Camp David. But since it's a domestic issue, they call both the White House staff as well as their boss, the National Security Advisor, and let them know that something has happened. After that, the emphasis is what happened and are there any survivors. In both cases, it's hard to believe that there were any survivors, but that's what first comes to people's minds.
And give us a sense, I guess what might be different this time around, 17 years after Challenger, what might be different is the specter of terrorism. Certainly terrorism existed back then, but it wasn't on the forefront of our minds as it is today.
Absolutely. In fact, they probably have that right on top of their checklist. Any time anything happens, is there a connection to terrorism? And if so, how can I find out about it? Because people will start asking those questions. Absolutely. And that's what makes everything different today than it was then.
Take us through those hours, though. I'm sure it's all a bit of a blur to you. And the response and the confusion which inevitably follows something like this.
Let me tell you a little bit about what happened in 1986 and then shift it over to today, and because there's quite a few parallels. At that time, shuttle liftoffs were routine. The networks didn't cover them. You didn't see Walter Cronkite anymore at the beach, but CNN was there, and we were in the sit room watching the liftoff and saw the explosion. And the Situation Room is really geared towards international events, but clearly certain domestic things require their attention. So I ran upstairs from my office in the sit room and broke the basic protocol of White House behavior. I opened doors without being asked to enter, or opened doors without an appointment. And I started with John Poindexter, the National Security Advisor, and I just stuck my head in and said, the Challengers exploded. We don't know what happened. And I went then next to...
Michael Vaughn, stand by 1 second. We got a dispatch from James Hartsfield in Houston.
Sure.
Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. That statement will be broadcast on NASA television live, again beginning at noon Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. A media statement by NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe. A space shuttle contingency has been declared in Mission Control. Flight controllers continue to secure information and data and all notes pertinent to Columbia's descent from orbit this morning. Communications with Columbia were lost at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time as Columbia flew above north central Texas at an altitude of approximately 200,000 feet and a speed of 12,500 miles per hour. Mission Control had no further communications or tracking with Columbia following that time. Search and rescue teams in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and in portions of East Texas and along Columbia's planned route toward the Kennedy Space Center have been alerted to the Space Shuttle contingency and are actively at work. The location of any possible debris should be immediately reported to local authorities who will be in contact with NASA and Air Force search and rescue personnel. Any debris that is located may be hazardous and should be avoided due to the toxic propellants used on board the Space Shuttle. Again, a press statement and availability by NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe.
All right, we've been listening to James Hartsfield, Public Affairs Officer in Houston. He's sitting in one of those consoles there. I don't know if you noticed during that shot, there were a lot of boxes, look like moving boxes. One of the things that is part of the protocol here is to gather your notes, gather all your documents, all your data. All of that is sealed up, put in boxes, and ultimately will be the focus of a commission that will look into exactly what's going on here. But you see the various positions. They're picking up notebooks and documents. Preserving data is the key here. Capturing what's on the screens, printing out notes in order to capture exactly what happened in those final minutes of the Space Shuttle Columbia. 1 p.m. Eastern, Sean O'Keefe, the administrator of NASA, little more than a year into his job, will address the nation from the Kennedy Space Center. We, of course, will bring that to you live. Okay. I guess, given what we've been reporting to you and showing you all day, what I'm about to tell you is perhaps obvious, but what senior officials are telling us is confirming what we've seen, which is that the shuttle is, quote, gone. Let's leave that at that. Michael Vaughn, we were talking about the confusion and what happens in the hours subsequent to these kinds of things and how the government pulls itself together. Take us inside that once again.
As I was mentioning to you, I simply ran upstairs when the Challenger exploded and threw open the doors and told people, went from Poindexter to Vice President Bush to Don Regan, the Chief of Staff, and then we all ended up in the Oval Office, watching CNN run those pictures of the Challenger explosion over and over again, just as you've done today with this shuttle. Then it was a question of finding out what happened, and it's a matter of getting on the telephone and finding out from NASA what they thought had happened. Did they know anything about survivors? What caused it? All that sort of thing. And there was just an incessant stream of questions from upstairs about all of this, and what we tried to do was gather that information as fast as we could. The same thing happened today. The duty officers probably saw it first on the news, heard about it from NASA, and immediately notified people right up the chain, and immediately started making telephone calls to find out what had happened. In the case with any crisis, a bolt from the blue, the government's the first action you have to take is get everybody up to speed on what happened, so everyone has the same level of information. What happened, where did it occur, that sort of thing, and then go from there. With respect to NASA, it's just a question of getting on the phone. With other kinds of crises, you have to call upon many, many sources of information to get that information.
Michael, if you could tell us then, just recounting, when it became, I think we probably, as you put it, CNN's a bit more nimble now. I think we have a clearer indication earlier on. It was many, many hours, as I recall, after the Challenger explosion before we really had a sense of what happened.
It was. Time is more compressed now. What I did was I invited the administrator of NASA to come over to my office and use it as his command center, because the rest of the government didn't have those facilities as they do now. And he came over and we helped him draft some statements and make telephone calls. And we got Johnson and Kennedy spacecraft centers on a speaker box on the telephone, and they relayed real-time information to us as they acquired it. And then we would pass it upstairs.
Michael Vaughn, formerly in the Situation Room, and who happened to be there on January 28th, 1986, the day the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded some 70 seconds after leaving the launch pad there, killing all 7 crew members in that case. 17 years ago this past week. Let's get Cliff Johnson on the line. Cliff Johnson is an assistant to the governor of Texas, Rick Perry. Cliff, what can you tell us about the effort to preserve the debris field and perhaps more importantly, keep people away from any debris?
Well, we're watching the debris field. Evidently, this went from Navarro County, Corsicana, through Anderson County, Palestine, over to Cherokee County, through Nacogdoches County, over to San Augustine County. We have about 25 pieces of debris field. The biggest that I've been reported is anywhere from 3 to 4 foot square. We've had a few calls in on some small fires, nothing that couldn't be controlled. We have some folks reporting the smell of some kind of propellant, and so we're telling everybody to be very, very careful. We're securing all those sites, and we have the local fire department, local DPS, state troopers, the sheriff's office, the police department. Everybody is securing these sites, and we're building a list of those sites in the Palestine, the county seat of Anderson County, and the Anderson County Sheriff's Office as we speak.
How big a debris field, Cliff, have you been able to sort of pinpoint?
Well, from what we can tell, it runs all the way from the northwest to the southeast through, starting in primarily at I-45 at Corsicana and Navarro County, all the way through Anderson County, all the way over to the Louisiana border. We're getting reports that maybe Nacogdoches County and San Augustine County took the brunt of it.
And I'm sorry, I'm not familiar enough with Texas geography to get a sense of how many miles it is. From I-45 to the border is what?
Well, I would guess as a crow flies, probably anywhere from 120 to 150 miles. We're 60 miles from Nacogdoches, from Palestine, and we're about 60 miles to Corsicana going back to the west. So you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 to 150 miles from Corsicana, probably to the Louisiana border.
Okay, huge area. And do we have any reports of injuries on the ground, either from impact or from people who pick something up that is toxic?
None. We have no reports of injuries whatsoever.
All right. Cliff Johnson, let's hope it stays just that way. Cliff Johnson is an assistant to the governor, Rick Perry, in the great state of Texas, where they have a huge, huge debris field. We're talking about an area that spans 120 miles. Let's bring people up to date at the noon hour Eastern time. We should have been, at this point, showing you about a 20 or 30-second clip of the Space Shuttle Columbia landing about 9:15 a.m. Eastern time. That's when it should have touched down gently at the Kennedy Space Center, the 3-mile-long runway there. Instead, we've been showing you this, which is the final moments of the Space Shuttle Columbia. The old gray lady of the shuttle fleet, as some call it, perhaps not indicative of its condition, however, as it broke up over north-central Texas, altitude of 200,000 feet at some 12,500 miles an hour, faster than a speeding bullet, quite literally. Mission Control lost contact with the orbiter about 15 or 16 minutes prior to its anticipated landing. Now, the landing scenario begins literally over the Indian Ocean with a deorbit burn. It's an incredible glider ride, braking glider ride, all the way halfway around the planet to the Kennedy Space Center. Tremendous stresses induced on the orbiter as it bleeds off speed and trades speed for heat, quite frankly. 20,000 tiles are on the outside of a space shuttle in order to protect its aluminum frame from that heat in excess of 2,000 degrees, well beyond the melting point of aluminum. 7-person crew was on board, commanded by Rick Husband, a colonel in the United States Air Force, on his second flight, his first as commander. There's the remainder of the crew. If you put in the telestrator, I'll help people see who's who. And there's Rick Husband there. His pilot was on his first flight, and he was a commander of the United States Navy, William Willie McCool. Ilan Ramon, the first Israeli ever to fly in space. And I'm listening to NASA for just a moment. He's repeating that we're going to get a news conference at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Michael Anderson, mission specialist who was on his second flight. He flew to the space station Mir in 1998. Kepalana Chawla, who was born in India and is a naturalized American and for fun flew gliders and flew also before in 1997, operating the robot arm of the shuttle for a experimental scientific mission. Laurel Clark, she was on her first flight, selected by NASA in 1996, PhD, hailing from Racine, Wisconsin. And finally, David Brown, who was selected by NASA in the same astronaut class, also on his first flight, captain of the United States Navy. They conducted a successful 16-day science mission and did everything they set out to do, by all accounts. And everything, they had a few problems, but every mission has a few problems. Humidifier kind of acted up. Some of the experiments gave them fits, but essentially had a very successful 16-day science run, covering all manner of life sciences and physical properties and protein crystal growth and everything from that to looking at how dust storms impact global warming was a part of this mission. Let's go back to the White House. Suzanne Malveaux is there. The president is due to arrive any minute now, might be there now. Suzanne, what do you have for us?
We are expecting the president to arrive momentarily at the Southwest Gate by motorcade. As you know, the president returning from his weekend planned at Camp David. He heard the news, we are told, shortly after NASA had lost contact with the shuttle. He was immediately notified by his chief of staff, Andy Card. We're also told that the vice president, as well as Secretary of State Colin Powell, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Richard Myers, was also notified at that time. We were told the president made a recall that he has talked to the director of NASA, Sean O'Keefe, at 10:30 this morning, and that U.S. officials have been in contact with Israeli officials about this tragedy. We expect, sources tell us, that the president will be calling Prime Minister Ariel Sharon later in the day. Right now, what is happening is that the aides are behind closed doors. They're debating on just how the president will address the country. We have been told that he will not formally address the nation until after NASA formally gives its presentation, and then the president will speak, we are told. But as you can imagine, Miles, really quite a tragic situation. We saw early this morning people who immediately after they found out back here at the White House, Dr. Rice, as well as other staffers getting the news firsthand, of course, monitoring the situation. This a big tragedy for the country as well as for this administration, already dealing with the situation in Iraq as well as 9/11. Quite a shock to many people here at the White House. Miles?
All right, Suzanne Malveaux, thank you very much. We will be checking in at the White House frequently all throughout the rest of this afternoon. We're told we're going to hear from NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe first, and then the president will make some sort of address to the nation. We got to remind you about the debris, and I apologize to those of you who've been watching for some length of time if this is very repetitive and irrelevant if you don't live in this part of the world, but it's worth mentioning repeatedly. If you see what you're seeing right here at this parking lot, that's a shot from one of our viewers. That's a piece of Columbia's debris. Don't touch it. It's the shuttle is just a witch's brew of toxic chemicals. After it lands, the folks who first approach the orbiter are wearing full respirator devices because there's so many gases which come off of it, which might cause you immediate and long-term health effects. We're talking about monomethylhydrazine, nitrogen tetroxide primarily, two very volatile chemicals. They are, after all, designed to create explosions spontaneously, spontaneous combustion, when the two meet. And that's what allows the shuttle to maneuver when it's in orbit and when it's in the higher altitudes. All right, we're going to show you something that's kind of raw video coming in. This is some video which comes to us. It's amateur video of what we've been showing you through the good graces of WFAA all day. There you see it. Well, we'll try to get that together for you. And as soon as we get it queued up, we'll... but I just want to underscore the point. If you see it, please don't touch it. Notify the authorities and let them know where it is. It's important that they get a hold of all this debris because that'll ultimately be a part of the investigation. But really more important, it's in your own best interest not to touch it because it can really, really cause you some harm. As we try to get that tape together, I want to tell you a little bit about Ilan Ramon. Ilan Ramon, who you see in the far right of this picture here, you see the flag of Israel behind him. First Israeli to fly in space, an absolute hero of the Jewish state, and decorated fighter pilot who actually helped take out Saddam Hussein's nuclear facility in the mid-'80s in Iraq, among other things. Flew in space, the son of a Holocaust survivor who really saw his mission as a manifestation of things to come, of a better day for the Middle East. That might sound a little bit Pollyanna, but he saw this as a way of bringing some hope to his nation and perhaps to his whole region. One of the experiments which he was charged with was to look at the very building blocks of the universe and how micrometeors might have carried the seeds of life from planet to planet, perhaps seeding the solar system with life, if you will. But what's perhaps most interesting about that experiment is the two principal scientists on it were an Israeli and a Palestinian. And it proved that, at least in this case, the high frontier was one place where people who don't get along can find a way to get along. Let's listen to what Ilan Ramon had to say to us before he left.
You're flying some special things with you to space. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Yes, I fly with me, first of all, I fly with me the Israeli emblem, which I asked for from the President of Israel. And he sent me an Israeli flag, actually it's an Israeli emblem. I also fly a very special drawing of Peter Ginz, who was a boy, 13, 14-year-old boy in Theresienstadt, one of the camps, and he and a group of other kids there were writing their own paper in the camp, and they were transferring this paper from one to another to read it. And Peter was a very, very talented guy, a boy actually. He was interested in science and in writing and in painting, and he drew at that time, as he visioned, Earth would look like from the moon. And I'm taking his drawing made it after the war, and they are now in the Museum of Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. And they were kind and gave me this picture, this drawing, and I will take it with me.
Ilan Ramon, a member of the crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia, lost above Texas today, right about 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Let's continue our discussion of Ilan Ramon, who is a bona fide hero of the State of Israel. For that, we turn to Kelly Wallace, who joins us from Jerusalem. Kelly?
Miles, as we've been saying throughout the day, tremendous sadness throughout this country, throughout the government, also every day Israelis reacting. Also, Colonel Ramon's family speaking out, his sister-in-law doing an interview with Israeli television a short time ago. She said, quote, "I know that he would want to be remembered as the first Israeli astronaut. He was elated with joy." Also, Colonel Ramon's brother did an interview. He said that he had spoken to Colonel Ramon's wife. They talked about how this was a big tragedy. He also said how everyone was so euphoric, how this was really a dream come true, and obviously now the entire family dealing with the unthinkable. The Prime Minister himself, Ariel Sharon, his office, has issued a statement. The Prime Minister has been watching events, we are told, on television from his farm in southern Israel. In that statement, the Prime Minister's office saying, quote, "The government of Israel and the people of Israel pray together with the whole world for the safety of the astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia." The statement going on to say the state of Israel and its citizens stand at this difficult hour with the families of the astronauts, Colonel Ramon's family, the American people, and the U.S. government, with a joint prayer to God, the Creator, that the astronauts will return safely to their homes. Now, we do know that the U.S. Embassy in Washington, or rather the Israeli Embassy in Washington, has dispatched a team to Florida to be with Colonel Ramon's wife and his 4 children who were there to watch the return of the space shuttle. We also know that the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Danny Ayalon, spoke earlier in the day with the director of NASA, Sean O'Keefe, and a spokesman in Washington for the Israeli embassy, saying this is a tragedy both for the Israeli people and the American people. Throughout the day, our colleagues have been talking to people on the streets of Israel. You can imagine tremendous sadness. One woman telling my colleague, quote, "He was the first astronaut to observe Shabbat in space. It was a beautiful experience for Jewish people, something the Jewish people could be very proud of." We've been talking throughout the day about the context, this coming really as the Israeli people have been dealing with more than 2 years of violence in this second Palestinian intifada against Israel. And Miles, I can tell you I was here when Colonel Ramon took off on the space shuttle, and we watched the coverage, front page news in every newspaper, live coverage on every Israeli television station, a sense of joy, a sense of happiness, and many reporters. Miles, let me toss back to you now for the latest.
Kelly Wallace, thank you very much. And really the kind of attention and excitement that about the mission, which I guess we've lost Kelly. Can we continue the discussion with her, with Kelly? All right, we'll check in with Kelly in just a moment. But the point I was going to try to make is that for many of us here in the United States, for many people who don't follow the space program closely, the whole event of a space shuttle mission, this after all was the 113th mission, become on the order of routine or seemingly routine. We can tell you it wasn't. It wasn't, and anybody who knows anything or took the time to learn about it would tell you that this was an experimental vehicle right on the edge of human capability. We have another view of this, and we've been showing you that view from our affiliate WFAA, which clearly shows an in-flight breakup. There's no doubt about that. The cause is another matter entirely. This is amateur video, which was shot out of Lafayette, Louisiana, from Rob Perillo. Rob is on the line with us. Rob, what did you see and hear?
Well, Miles, I'm a meteorologist. I work for the CBS affiliate in Lafayette, Louisiana. I always tell our viewers, go out, take a look at the shuttle when it comes in, when it doesn't fly space station missions. And normally we can see the shuttle coming across southern Louisiana. And there what you see is a little bit of a different angle of the video that you saw out of WFAA a little bit earlier. This morning, I went out to view this shuttle and took off a telescopic lens and went straight out of the video recorder. And you can see, again, looks like some of the debris there taking a little bit of a right-hand turn, some of it continuing on. And after that, we normally would hear the sonic boom. And instead of one singular sonic boom, I heard probably on the order of 5 or 6 smaller sonic booms that were stretched out over about a 10-second time frame.
Well, Rob, that clearly, if you're a shuttle watcher and you look at that, which once again I've been hearkening back to the Mir re-entry, which we brought you a year and a half or so ago. The fact that you saw 5 pieces and heard 5 sonic booms, did you realize immediately there was trouble?
Yeah, I knew immediately, and it's a good thing that you guys probably didn't take the audio part of that tape. I had the NASA website on my broadband computer here, and I ran into the house and heard nothing but silence for the next 10 minutes, and I knew right then and there something was wrong.
Rob Perillo, can you just give me a sense of your thoughts as you witnessed this?
Well, I had the same feeling. I remember the Challenger accident. I was working at an aviation company at the time, and the utter shock of and unbelievability of the initial moment. I had gotten my wife up and my daughter, my 9-year-old, to go outside and take a look at this, and the astonishment that you feel right offhand is indescribable, and you know immediately that when you see multiple pieces of debris flying that it's not a good situation. And we knew what we were looking at as the system was coming in. It looked good. We normally see it when it's between Dallas and San Antonio. That's where I picked it up. And then where you see that debris was more than likely very close to the Texas-Louisiana border.
Mr. Perillo, thank you for sharing that tape with us. We do appreciate it, because what that shows us is the time immediately after the WFAA tape, the shuttle moving from west to east, Mach 16 or so. Obviously, they're very quickly thereafter, but it definitely shows that distinct pattern. Multiple targets is the technical term, big pieces, multiple sonic booms, quite clear. We're talking about an in-flight breakup. Where are we headed now? All right, here we go. This is a live picture from our affiliate KDFW out of Dallas-Fort Worth. You're looking at a piece of debris. Space Shuttle Columbia. We're told the debris field extends 120 miles or so. When you're traveling that fast, that high, that's to be expected. Of course, some pieces lighter than others. Some pieces have aerodynamic qualities. They'll flutter down. Others will travel down very quickly. It's impossible to make out what that is, except to tell you it's because it is dark. It is probably something to do with the underbelly, the portions of the shuttle that has those dark tiles. There are 20,000 tiles in all on a space shuttle. I've actually scaled back the number a little bit, but tens of thousands anyhow. The black ones on the bottom are designed to handle more significant heat loads. The whiter tiles, which are more on the top and sides where the heat is not as much of an issue, are designed to handle to shed less heat, put it that way. Live pictures, KDFW, and I don't know exactly where that is, but I'll just tell you that it's obviously in that swath of Texas from I-45 all the way to the Louisiana border. Let's send it over to Heidi Collins. Heidi?
Thanks, Miles. We are going to be seeing many more pictures like that because that debris field is so very large. We want to take a minute now, though, to talk more about the astronauts. Of course, we are all mourning the loss of each and every one of those 7 astronauts today. 6 Americans on board, 1 non-American. That non-American is Israeli Air Force Colonel Ilan Ramon. He was a payload specialist, 48 years old, married and father of 4. We've been talking about him a lot today because of the special attention that went to him for being the very first Israeli astronaut. And as Kelly Wallace has been reporting, certainly during a time of unrest and tragedy in that country already, he was a symbol of hope and had hoped very much to bring that to his family and his countrymen in Israel. Let's go ahead to Judy Woodruff now. She's standing by in Washington, D.C. to tell us even more about Colonel Ramon. Judy?
Thank you, Heidi. We are in Washington, as you said, and with me now is the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Daniel Ayalon. Mr. Ambassador, how did you find out about this morning?
Well, first of all, I heard it from the news, and then Sean O'Keefe, Mr. Sean O'Keefe, the administrator of NASA, was kind enough to call and give me an update. And this is a big tragedy for the United States, for Israel, and mainly for the families. And this is where we are headed now, to be with the family and to help in any way we can.
You're flying in a few minutes, or a few minutes from now, to where? Where will you go?
We're going to go to the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral in Florida. This is where the family is being flown to. They were waiting for the landing in Houston.
They were in Houston waiting.
They were in Houston waiting. So right now they're being flown by NASA. We will go there, we will meet with them, and we will try to give them as much comfort as possible.
You told me a moment ago that you had just met Mr. Ramon, 2 weeks ago, just 2 weeks ago, before the shuttle flight took off.
Yes, this was on the day of the launch. This was a very special day for Israel, for Israeli-U.S. relations, and I think from a very human perspective, the special story of Ilan Ramon, who is the son of a survivor, who took with him to space, as he mentioned here before, a drawing of Peter Gintz, a 14-year-old Jewish boy who perished in the Holocaust. And before his death, he was drawing the Earth as he imagined from space. This picture, this drawing, went with Ilan on board and stayed with him till the end.
What did it mean for the people of Israel, of your country, to have an astronaut going into space on a shuttle for the first time from Israel?
Well, there was very special significance. First of all, we are very proud of our technological advance and prowess, so this was also a testament to Israel's position in high tech and excellence and progress. And of course, every endeavor that we do with the United States, we're very much proud of. So it was also a testament to the strength of the relationship between the U.S. and America, and Israel. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, and we have a special bond. And we took it into another dimension up in space. And of course, the special story of Ilan Ramon. And just think that in 2 generations, when we were at the lowest ebb, on verge of demise in the Holocaust, and in 2 generations, we were soaring up to excellence and to the state of the art. So this was very, very significant.
Tell us a little bit more about Colonel Ramon. As you said, as I understand, both his parents were survivors of the concentration. His mother was a survivor of the concentration camp. He had fought in 2 wars for Israel.
Yes, he was a
fighter pilot.
Right.
And went on 7 or 8 years ago to say, I may have a career as an astronaut.
Yes, he did. That was his calling. And of course, in our context with the United States, with the administration, and we thought of new areas of cooperation. The natural one was to look up into space. We have been cooperating in so many areas here on Earth. So there was only to look up to extend the cooperation and the friendship between our 2 countries. That was a natural thing to do. And Ilan Ramon was the natural Israeli astronaut to send. He was the prepared mentally and of course professionally. He was the best we could offer.
What about his family? He had 4 children, yes. A wife. They've been living with him in the United States. They obviously have extended family in Israel. This has to be unimaginable.
Yes, it is. His father came specially. The training was, Judy, for more than 2 years. So he came here with the family, and they were very well integrated into the Houston community. They went, his kids, he has 4 kids, as you mentioned, they went to school there in Houston, and his wife was very much a member of the community there. They really enjoyed, I talked to his wife, they really enjoyed life in Houston, and being with the astronauts, being with the Americans, it was a very special experience for them.
And now, Ambassador Ayalon, you're headed to Cape Canaveral for what is going to be a very difficult, very, very difficult time with them. We do so appreciate your coming in. Ambassador Daniel Ayalon from Israel to the United States, about to fly, as he said, to Cape Canaveral to join the family of astronaut Ilan Ramon, the Israeli astronaut on board the shuttle Columbia. Once again, we're waiting for a press conference, at NASA press conference. That's at 1 o'clock Eastern. As we leave you, the flag at the White House at half-staff. Miles, back to you.
Need a name. Name? I think that picture tells us a lot right there, looking at the White House flag at half-staff as the nation begins a period of mourning and assessment and discussion in the wake of a terrible tragedy as good people lose their lives doing what they love and pushing the boundaries of space exploration. Let's bring in the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Dan Gilman. Ambassador Gilman, on behalf of the people of America, we offer our condolences to the people of Israel on this moment.
I can't hear him.
Apparently he cannot hear us, so we'll, can you hear us now, Mr. Ambassador? No, nope. He's unable to hear us. Let me show you something that is rather dramatic. One of our engineers here, who is a pilot as well as I am, we talk about these kinds of things a lot, pulled up the weather radar for the Shreveport, Louisiana area, and that is the wreckage of the shuttle Columbia coming through, reacting to the radar, which detects heat and motion, and that green area is just kind of the ground clutter from Shreveport. But what you're seeing, that red scar there, is the final remnants of the space shuttle Columbia before it fell to Earth. There's Alexandria, Monroe, Shreveport, Tyler, Texas, right in the border. We've been told the debris field extends right to the border of Louisiana. I suspect there's some places in Louisiana right now where there are pieces of debris. We haven't heard from as many people from there, but the word to them is the same as the word to the people of Texas, which is stay away from it. Call the authorities, but stay away from it. Let's go now back to the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Dan Gilman. Mr. Ambassador, good to have you with us. And what I said before was on behalf of the people of America, we'd like to extend our condolences to the people of Israel. And just wanted to get your thoughts right now of Ilan Ramon and what he signified to your country.
Well, thank you, and I would like to express also the condolences of the Israeli people, although I'm still clinging to some sliver of hope that maybe our prayers will come true, our prayers and thoughts and hearts are with the American people and with Ilan Ramon's family on this very, very difficult day. This is a very special day for us. This was meant to be a very special day for us because this cooperation really demonstrated the true bond between Israel and the United States. Two brave and free countries, two great democracies sharing together in this quest to explore and to excel. And Ilan Ramon to us was not just a pilot or an astronaut, he was a symbol. He was a symbol of excellence and freedom at a time when Israel is undergoing one of the most difficult periods in his life. And I can tell you that he became a national hero just by going into space with his American colleagues. I spoke to the Prime Minister last night and he was really anxiously awaiting Ilan Ramon's return. I spoke to many friends in Israel today, and the devastation and the horror and the grief are just unimaginable, because it was a ray of hope, and it was a ray of something good happening in the midst of 2 very, very difficult years in which Israel is facing terrorism and some of the most ugly and vicious and brutal manifestations of human behavior ever before witnessed. And the fact that Ilan Ramon, the son of Holocaust survivors, actually went up there with his American colleagues, forging this bond and really saying to everybody that at the end of the day, good prevails over evil, and that we shall all prevail over the evil surrounding us, brought us a lot of hope and a lot of elation. And because of that, the feelings today are of such devastation and such real sadness.
It's hard to imagine how profound the sadness must be, given especially. Can you still hear me, Mr. Ambassador? I'm afraid we've lost communication with him once again. We'll leave it at that. All right. We've been hearing all morning from a lot of people across a wide swath of central, northern, eastern part of Texas who have seen things and have actually found some wreckage, which we invite you to stay away from. Linda Steen or Steed? Linda Steed is on the line with us now. Linda, what did you see and hear this morning?
Well, we got up to watch the shuttle come over, and about 2 minutes after 8, we saw it on the western horizon. And when it got nearer, we could see flecks or pieces of something coming off of it, because we thought it was just the afterburners or something. But when it got directly overhead, you could see more things coming off the back of it, but we still didn't realize what was happening. And then we heard the racket, the sound, after it passed by us. Just reverberated and reverberated for several minutes, like an earthquake or something. But that's basically it. I guess we saw it as it was breaking up, though we didn't realize it at the time.
Linda, describe that racket a little better for us, if you could. What did it sound like?
Well, it started out like a heavy thunder and a rolling thunder sound, and then the dogs started barking and the chickens started crowing and everything. Just a real weird sound, and then got shook the earth. That was kind of it, kind of like a really heavy thunder.
Did you see anything out your window then, or did you just hear it? I mean, you were watching it. I'm sorry.
I was standing outside.
I want to make it clear.
Yes,
I apologize.
I was standing
I'm talking
outside.
To a lot of...
We saw it.
Describe it then. Describe exactly what it looked like.
Well, coming toward us, we could see the sun glinting off of it, and we could see like shiny pieces in behind it that we thought was, like I said, afterburner. But all the time it came directly overhead, we could still see these pieces from behind. But there was a main part of it that seemed to be intact as it came overhead.
Yeah. Linda Steed, have you heard about reports, or have you seen any of the debris?
Not personally, but 5 miles west of where I live right here, there are some pieces down in a church parking lot and behind the church in the woods. And there's some down in town. My son called me a while ago, and he saw a piece that was right downtown Nacogdoches, right behind one of the banks.
You're looking at live pictures from KDFW from their helicopter. This is a piece of the Space Shuttle Columbia, which lies in a median of a highway there in
that would be Highway 7 out near the airport, kind of west of town.
I see. So that's not far from where you are, Linda?
It's not too terribly far from where I am. No, I'm west of town, and it's west of town, just further south than I am.
Hard to pick up what that is, but...
They said it was about a 10-foot piece is what I heard.
It's a big piece, that is for sure.
Yes.
And difficult to figure out what part of the shuttle that is. In any case...
Sir, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Something cut in on my phone, but that's okay.
That's okay. I got to ask your thoughts, not just as a person who happened to have this happen on their back door. What are your thoughts as an American at this moment?
Oh, I'm devastated. Devastated. It's unbelievable. Just makes you so sad.
Yeah. Linda Steed, joining us from Nacogdoches County. Texas, where significant pieces of debris, the Space Shuttle Columbia, have fallen as it disintegrated at an altitude of 200,000 feet, some 12,500 miles an hour, much faster than a speeding bullet. And I'll call your attention, well, we've got a wider shot now, but there was a triangle of crime scene tape there, that yellow tape that you see. That's what we're encouraging you all to do if you find a piece like that. Get the authorities